Rifle had always been a place where everyone knew everyone else. Located in the Colorado River Valley, this small town with a population of just over 9,000 people lived a quiet life. Nothing extraordinary ever happened here, except for the occasional local making the news for a bar fight or petty theft. Most residents worked in the oil and gas industry or provided services to those who did. Wayne Stewart was one of those people. At 32, he was considered one of the best mechanics in the county. His small auto repair shop, Stewart Motors, on 3rd Street, had a reputation as a place where you could get any car fixed, from old pickup trucks to modern SUVs. Wayne had inherited the business from his father, who had died of a heart attack 5 years earlier and had practically lived in the garage ever since. Tall, with strong mechanic's hands and always slightly tousled dark hair, Wayne had the kind of natural charisma that made people trust him. He knew how to talk to customers so that even the most complicated breakdowns didn't seem like a disaster. "Everything can be fixed," he would say, and people believed him. At home, he was greeted by Trudy, a nurse at the local hospital in Rifle. They had been married for 8 years, ever since Trudy graduated from nursing school in Denver. The wedding was modest, but everyone said they were perfect for each other. Trudy was the complete opposite of her husband, quiet, organized, and always ready to help. At 29, she looked younger than her age, with short blonde hair and kind eyes that shone with a special warmth when she talked about her patients. Their house on Maple Street was the epitome of suburban comfort. A 2-story house with white walls and blue shutters, a small garden with rose bushes that Trudy watered carefully every morning before work. Neighbors often said that the Stewarts were the kind of family that made Rifle a special place. But behind the facade of perfection lay problems that no one knew about. They had been trying to have a baby for 3 years. Trudy bought pregnancy tests every month, hoping to see 2 lines, but the result was always negative. She read books on conception, changed her diet, and made Wayne take vitamins. Nothing helped. "Maybe we should see a specialist," she suggested one day at dinner. Wayne put down his fork and looked at his wife. Something fleeting flashed in his eyes, irritation or fatigue. "Trudy, we've already talked about this. Everything happens when it's meant to happen." "But it's been 3 years. I know how much time has passed." The conversation came to a standstill again. Wayne got up from the table and went into the living room to turn on the TV. Trudy remained seated, staring at the uneaten food on his plate. Financial problems added to the tension. The auto repair shop brought in a decent income, but not enough to live carefree. Rent, parts, insurance, all of that ate into the profits. Trudy's salary at the hospital was stable but small. They weren't poor, but they couldn't afford much of what they wanted. Wayne was spending more and more time in the garage, working late. He said he needed more orders, more customers. Trudy understood him, but she missed the time they spent together. They used to go to the mountains on weekends, go to the local movie theater, or just walk around town. Now their conversations were limited to discussing bills and plans for the next day. In this situation, the appearance of Ursula in their lives seemed like a blessing. Ursula Harris was Trudy's mother, and perhaps the only person who genuinely cared about the young family. At 48, she was attractive, slim, with chestnut hair and expressive eyes. After divorcing Roland 3 years ago, she moved into a small apartment in downtown Rifle and got a job as an administrator at an insurance company. Ursula often visited her daughter, helped around the house, and cooked dinner when Trudy worked the night shift. She was the kind of person you could rely on. "Mom, you're saving us," Trudy would say, hugging her mother after a particularly difficult day at the hospital. "Don't be silly, dear. Family is supposed to support each other." Ursula really did a lot for them. She brought groceries when they ran out of money before payday. She took Wayne's laundry to the laundromat when the washing machine broke down. She even helped with small repairs around the house, tightening faucets, changing light bulbs. Gradually, she began to spend more time at her daughter's house than in her own apartment. She was especially often there when Trudy was working night shifts at the hospital. Nurses often worked 12-hour shifts, and Ursula said she didn't want Wayne sitting home alone. Men need company, she explained to her daughter. They get bored on their own. At first, Wayne was somewhat skeptical about his mother-in-law's presence. He was a man who valued his personal space, and Ursula's constant presence in the house made him a little nervous. But over time, he got used to it. Ursula turned out to be a pleasant conversationalist. She was a good listener, didn't give unsolicited advice, and was a much better cook than Trudy. In the evenings, when Trudy was working, they often sat in the living room, watching TV and talking. Ursula talked about her work, how difficult it had been to get through her divorce, and her plans for the future. Wayne shared his business problems, his fears, and his hopes. "You know, Wayne," she said one day, "I've always thought you were the perfect husband for my daughter. You take care of her and work tirelessly. Trudy is lucky to have you." Wayne felt something warm spread through his chest. It had been a long time since he had heard such words. Trudy had been criticizing him more lately, for not spending enough time with the family, for not wanting to see a doctor about their infertility, for working too much. "Thank you, Ursula. That means a lot to me." "I mean it. Roland was never this attentive. All he ever thought about was his trucks and the road." Roland Harris really was a completely different person. A long-haul truck driver, he spent more time on the road than at home. Even when he was in Rifle, he seemed distant, as if his mind was still somewhere on the road. Their marriage had lasted 25 years, but the last 10 had been more of a coexistence than a family life. The divorce was relatively amicable. No one fought over property or money. Roland left the house to Ursula, took his pickup truck, and moved to a trailer park on the outskirts of town. He continued to work as a driver, continuing to spend weeks on the road. The only thing that changed was that now he was returning not to a family home, but to a lonely trailer. Trudy took her parents' divorce hard. She had always thought they had a strong family, despite all their problems. The divorce made her cling even more to her marriage, trying to make it perfect. "I don't want us to be like my parents," she told Wayne. "I want us to always talk to each other, to solve problems together." Wayne nodded and promised that they wouldn't repeat her parents' mistakes. But deep down, he sometimes envied Roland. He was free, could go wherever he wanted, and didn't have to answer to anyone for his time. Wayne, on the other hand, felt trapped between the demands of business, his wife's expectations, and his own needs. Ursula understood him better than he could have expected. She saw his fatigue, his attempts to be the perfect husband, his disappointment at not having children, and she didn't judge him or demand more than he could give. "You do enough," she said. "More than enough." Those words meant more to him than he was willing to admit. Winter in Rifle was always long and harsh. Snow lay on the ground from November to April, and during those months, life in the town seemed to come to a standstill. People stayed home more, stores closed early, and Wayne's auto repair shop had less work. Few people dared to take long trips on the snow-covered mountain roads. February 2023 was particularly cold. The temperature dropped to -20, and the wind from the mountains made the air even more bitter. Trudy was working longer hours than usual. It was peak cold and flu season at the hospital, and the nurses were taking extra shifts. It was during those long winter evenings that the closeness between Wayne and Ursula began to turn from simple friendship into something deeper and more dangerous. It all started with little things. Ursula began to stay longer in the house after Trudy left for work. Before, she usually made dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and went to her apartment. Now she stayed, saying she didn't want to leave Wayne alone in such cold weather. "The house seems so empty without Trudy," she said one day, settling down on the sofa next to Wayne. "Do you mind if I stay a little longer?" Wayne didn't mind. In fact, he began to look forward to these evenings. After a long day in the cold garage, coming home to an empty house, he found comfort in Ursula's presence. She created an atmosphere of warmth and coziness that was so lacking in his life. They became more open in their conversations. Ursula talked about her loneliness, about how difficult it was to rebuild her life after her divorce. "You know, I was married to Roland for 25 years. she said, staring into the fire. I don't even remember who I am without that. Just Ursula, without any prefixes. Wayne listened intently. He understood that feeling of loss, albeit for different reasons. Sometimes he felt lost too, lost in his endless work, in his attempts to live up to his wife's expectations, in the uncertainty of the future. You're a strong woman, he said. Not everyone could start over at your age. Ursula turned to him, and something flashed in her eyes that made his heart beat faster. Thank you for saying that. Roland never thought I was strong. To him, I was just a housewife who had to wait for him to come home. He didn't realize what he had. The words escaped Wayne before he could think them through. Ursula looked at him intently, and a silence filled with unspoken meanings hung between them. With each passing day, their conversations became more intimate. Ursula began to share details of her marriage that she had never told anyone before. Roland hasn't touched me in 10 years, she confessed one day. He came home, ate, slept, and left again. I felt like a piece of furniture in my own home. Wayne didn't know how to respond. He realized that these revelations were crossing the boundaries of normal communication between a son-in-law and his mother-in-law, but he couldn't bring himself to stop the conversation. Every woman deserves attention, he said finally. Do you think so? Of course. You're beautiful, smart, caring. Roland was a fool. Ursula smiled, and it wasn't a motherly smile. There was something feminine and seductive about it. The physical intimacy began almost by accident. One evening, while they were watching a movie, Ursula complained of a sore neck. She had been sitting at her computer in the office all day, and her muscles were tense. Do you want me to massage it? Wayne offered, without really thinking about the consequences. Do you know how to massage? A little. Working as a mechanic taught me a thing or two about muscles and tension. Ursula sat down with her back to him, and Wayne gently placed his hands on her shoulders. Her skin was warm and soft under his fingers. He could feel her relax under his touch. That feels so good, she whispered. I forgot what it's like to be touched with such tenderness. Wayne continued to massage her shoulders, but his thoughts were far from the innocent desire to help. He felt her closeness, heard her quiet sighs, felt his own body respond to the intimacy. When the massage was over, Ursula turned to him. The distance between their faces was only a few inches. Wayne saw golden sparks in her eyes and felt the warmth of her breath. Thank you, she whispered, and her hand touched his cheek. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it changed everything. Both of them knew they had crossed an invisible line. Over the next few days, they acted as if nothing had happened. Ursula still came over to cook dinner, and Wayne still thanked her for her help. But now there was a different tension between them, an electricity that they both felt, but didn't dare acknowledge. Trudy didn't notice anything. She was too busy with work and her own problems. Every month she bought a pregnancy test, and every month she was disappointed. She read medical articles, consulted with colleagues, and searched for reasons for their infertility. Maybe it's me, she said to Wayne after another negative test. Maybe I have some kind of problem. Don't be silly, Wayne replied, but his voice sounded distant. Everything will be fine. But it's been so long. Trudy, please, let's not talk about this today. He couldn't focus on the problems in their marriage. His mind was preoccupied with something else entirely. Memories of Ursula's touch, the way she looked at him, what might have happened if they had been alone. The next step came a week later. Ursula arrived earlier than usual, before Trudy had left for work. She brought groceries for dinner and started cooking in the kitchen. Wayne helped her by handing her dishes and ingredients. Be careful, she said, as he reached for the spices on the top shelf. Don't drop it. She was standing right under his arm, and when he reached for it, his body touched her back. The moment was fleeting, but both felt its intensity. Sorry, Wayne muttered, but didn't back away. It's okay, Ursula replied, but there was something new in her voice. Trudy entered the kitchen at that moment, but only noticed that her mother and husband were preparing dinner together. "How nice," she said, kissing her mother first, then her husband. "Thank you for helping each other." She left for work, unaware of the tension that filled the kitchen. Left alone, Wayne and Ursula worked in silence for a while. The air between them was electric, but neither dared to make the first move. "Wayne," Ursula finally said, "I need to tell you something." He turned to her, and she continued, "I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I feel something more than just brotherly affection for you." The words hung in the air between them. Wayne knew he should tell her that it was impossible, that they should forget about it. But instead, he took a step closer to her. "Ursula, I know you feel it too," she whispered. "I can see the way you look at me." He didn't deny it. He couldn't deny it. "This is crazy," he said. "I know, but I've been alone for so long and you make me feel like a woman." The first kiss was cautious, almost timid. It was as if they were both afraid of what was happening. But when their lips met, all hesitation disappeared. The kiss became passionate, desperate, as if they were trying to make up for all those years of loneliness and unfulfillment. When they finally pulled apart, they both knew there was no turning back. "What have we done?" Wayne whispered. "I don't know," Ursula replied, "but I don't regret it." In the weeks that followed, their relationship became regular. Every time Trudy worked the night shift, Ursula would come to their house. They didn't just kiss. Their intimacy grew deeper. They talked about things they had never discussed with anyone else, sharing their most secret thoughts and fears. Ursula told him about the dreams she had buried in her marriage to Roland, about her desire to travel, to study, to do what she loved. Wayne talked about his doubts about marriage, about how he sometimes felt trapped in his own life. "I love Trudy," he said, "but sometimes I feel like we've become strangers." "I understand," Ursula replied. "That's exactly how I felt with Roland in recent years." They justified their actions by telling themselves that no one would get hurt, that it was temporary, that they were just giving each other what they lacked in their lives. But deep down, they both knew they were playing with fire. The secrecy of their relationship became an additional thrill. When Trudy was at home, they behaved as usual, mother-in-law and son-in-law who simply got along well. But their glances, casual touches, and smiles were full of hidden meaning. One day, Trudy noticed that her mother looked better. "Mom, you look younger," she said. "You look so radiant." Ursula blushed, but quickly came up with a reply. "It must be the new face cream, or the vitamins I started taking. Or maybe it's just spring coming," added Wayne, and their eyes met for a second. But the longer their secret meetings continued, the more Wayne realized that he was in a difficult situation. He really felt something for Ursula, not just physical attraction, but emotional closeness. She understood him better than Trudy, supported him, made him feel like a real man. At the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. Every time Trudy came home tired after her shift, every time she thanked her mother for her help, Wayne's heart ached with shame. "Mom, you're so kind," Trudy would say, hugging Ursula. "I don't know what we'd do without you." "It's all right, dear," Ursula would reply. "Family has to stick together." Wayne turned away, unable to watch the scene. Ursula, however, seemed less tormented by guilt. For her, this relationship was a way to feel alive after years of loneliness. She told Wayne that she had no intention of destroying his marriage, that she just wanted a little happiness for herself. "I'm not asking you for anything impossible," she said. "I don't want you to leave Trudy. I just want us to have this time, these moments." But time was working against them. The longer their meetings continued, the harder it was to keep the secret. Wayne became distracted, sometimes forgetting his agreements with Trudy, and more often getting annoyed over trifles. Trudy began to notice the changes in her husband. "You've been acting strange lately," she said one day. Is something wrong? No, everything's fine, Wayne replied. I'm just tired. Maybe you should take some time off. We could go somewhere, just the two of us. The idea of traveling with his wife when his thoughts were occupied with another woman seemed unbearable to Wayne. Now is not the best time for a vacation, he said. Too much work. Trudy sighed. She could feel her husband pulling away from her, but she didn't understand why. April brought the long-awaited spring to Rifle. The snow began to melt, revealing dirty streets and the first green shoots in the front yards. At the hospital where Trudy worked, the cold season gave way to spring injuries and accidents on roads slippery with meltwater. Trudy had had a particularly hard week, 3 12-hour shifts in a row. She came home completely exhausted but couldn't sleep. Something was bothering her, although she couldn't figure out what it was. In early May, she noticed some strange symptoms. At first, it was just fatigue, which she attributed to hard work. Then, she developed headaches and swollen lymph nodes in her neck. As a nurse, Trudy knew that these could be signs of many illnesses, from a common virus to something more serious. Maybe you caught something at the hospital, Wayne suggested when she complained of feeling unwell. Maybe, Trudy replied, but her voice was doubtful. Although I always take all the necessary precautions. Ursula, as always, showed her concern. Honey, maybe you should take some time off work. You look pale. I can't, Trudy sighed. We're short-staffed right now. If I get sick, the other nurses will have to work even harder. But the symptoms persisted. 2 weeks later, fatigue and headaches were joined by a low-grade fever. Not high, but constant. Trudy began to worry seriously. One day, when she was feeling particularly unwell, the hospital's chief physician, Dr. Sanders, noticed her condition. Trudy, you don't look well, he said. When was the last time you had a complete checkup? 1.5 years ago, she replied. Everything was fine. I think you should get some tests done, especially considering that you and your husband are planning to have children. The doctor's words made Trudy think. Indeed, perhaps her fertility problems and her current symptoms were related. She made an appointment with her gynecologist for the following week. When she got home, she told Wayne about her conversation with Dr. Sanders. Maybe we'll finally find out what's going on, she said hopefully. Maybe I have some kind of infection that's preventing me from conceiving. Wayne nodded, but inside he felt sick. For the past few months, he had tried not to think about how his relationship with Ursula might affect Trudy's health. He told himself that they were being careful, that no one would get hurt. But his wife's words made him seriously consider the possible consequences for the first time. Ursula was also concerned by the news, but for different reasons. What if the doctors find something? She asked Wayne when they were alone. What if Trudy finds out? Finds out what? Wayne interrupted her. We're not to blame for anything, she's just tired from work. But his words sounded unconvincing even to himself. The gynecologist's examination went as usual. Dr. Martinez, an elderly woman with a kind face, listened attentively to Trudy's complaints and ordered a standard set of tests. We'll do a complete blood count, biochemistry, and hormones, she said, and a full panel for sexually transmitted infections. This is standard procedure for women planning a pregnancy. Trudy agreed without hesitation. She was sure that the tests would show something simple and easily treatable. The results were due in a week. That week dragged on agonizingly. Wayne became even more nervous and irritable. He couldn't concentrate on his work, constantly thinking about what Trudy's tests would show. Ursula was also on edge. She came to their house more often than usual, bustling about, cooking elaborate meals that no one ate. The ease that had once existed between her and Wayne was gone. Guilt and fear poisoned their relationship. Maybe we should stop, Wayne said one evening as they sat in the living room. Stop what? Ursula asked, even though she knew exactly what he meant. Us, these meetings, everything. Ursula paused, then said quietly, if that's what you want. I don't know what I want, Wayne admitted. I'm just afraid we've gone too far. We've already gone too far, Ursula replied. But if you think it will help. They didn't kiss that evening. Ursula left early, and Wayne stayed sitting in the living room, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what he was feeling. On Friday, May 19th, Trudy got her test results. She sat in Dr. Martinez's office, holding the papers that would change her life forever. I'm sorry, Trudy, the doctor said softly. The HIV test is positive. The words hung in the air. Trudy stared at the doctor, not understanding what she had heard. This is a mistake, she said finally. This can't be true. We checked twice, Dr. Martinez replied. Unfortunately, there is no mistake. Trudy felt her world crumbling around her. HIV, but how? She had been faithful to her husband, never used drugs, and had always been careful at work. But how is that possible? She asked, her voice trembling. There are several ways it can be transmitted, the doctor explained. Sexual contact, blood, mother to child. Given that you are married, it is most likely that the infection was sexually transmitted. You think my husband? I don't think anything in particular, replied the doctor, but your husband needs to get tested immediately. The drive home was a nightmare. Trudy drove on autopilot, her thoughts racing between denial and horror. She thought about Wayne, about how he would react to the news. Had he been cheating on her? Were all their problems conceiving related to this infection? When she got home, she found Wayne in the garage. He was working under the hood of his old pickup truck, his hands covered in oil. Hi, honey, he said without looking up. How's it going? Did you get the results? Wayne, Trudy said, and there was something in her voice that made him sit up straight. We need to talk. He saw her face and knew something was seriously wrong. What's wrong? I have HIV. The words hit him like a shot. Wayne turned pale and the wrench fell from his hands. What? He whispered. The tests showed that I'm HIV positive, Trudy repeated, struggling to get the words out. The doctor said you need to get tested too. Wayne felt the ground slip away beneath his feet. He knew this moment could come, but he wasn't ready for it. Everything seemed unreal, like a bad dream. How is this possible? He asked, his voice sounding strange. I don't know, Trudy replied, tears welling up in her eyes. Wayne, have you been cheating on me? The question hung in the air between them. Wayne knew he had to tell the truth, but he couldn't bring himself to say the words. Instead, he shook his head. No, he said. Of course not. Then how? Trudy asked through her tears. Where did it come from? I don't know, Wayne replied. Maybe at the hospital? Maybe some kind of blood accident? I've always been careful, Trudy said. I always wore gloves, followed all the protocols. They stood in the garage, looking at each other, both knowing that their lives had changed forever, but each was thinking their own thoughts. The next day, Wayne got his test results. The 2 days of waiting were torture. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything else. Ursula called him, but he didn't answer. He couldn't talk to her, couldn't even think about her. The result was predictable, HIV positive. I'm sorry, said Dr. Anderson, the family doctor who had been treating Wayne for several years. But there is good news. Modern medications allow people with HIV to live full lives. Wayne nodded, but he wasn't listening. He was thinking about how to tell Trudy, how to explain that he was infected too. At home, the conversation was difficult. So we're both infected, Trudy said when he told her the results. But how, Wayne? How did this happen? I don't know, he repeated. Maybe something in the past, before we got married? But we got tested before we got married, Trudy reminded him. Everything was fine. Maybe the tests weren't accurate. Trudy wanted to believe that explanation, but something inside her resisted. She had known her husband for 8 years, and he had never been so nervous, so evasive. Wayne, she said quietly, if you're hiding something from me, tell me now. I have a right to know. I'm telling you the truth, he replied, but he couldn't meet her gaze. At that moment, Ursula realized that she should get tested too. The thought terrified her, but she couldn't put it off any longer. She made an appointment with a doctor in a neighboring town. She didn't want anyone in Rifle to know about her problems. The results came back a week later. Ursula sat in her car in the parking lot near the clinic, holding the paper with the results in her hands. HIV positive. She didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at the words, feeling something inside her die. She knew what this meant not only for her, but also for Wayne and Trudy. That evening, she called Wayne. I need to see you, she said. Ursula, I can't right now. Wayne, I tested positive too. The silence lasted forever. Meet me at the park in an hour, he finally said. They met on a bench near the playground where little Trudy used to play. The park was empty. It was late, and few people were out in the cool weather. What are we going to do now? Ursula asked. I don't know, Wayne replied. Trudy suspects I'm hiding something. She keeps asking where it came from. What do you tell her? That I don't know, that it might be something from the past. Does she believe you? I don't know. So far, yes. But she's not stupid, Ursula. Sooner or later, she'll figure it out. Ursula was silent, thinking about the situation. Maybe we should tell her the truth, she finally suggested. Are you crazy? Wayne snapped. It would destroy her. It would destroy all of us. But sooner or later she'll find out, Ursula insisted. It's better to hear the truth from us than to find out some other way. No, Wayne said firmly. We're not telling anyone. Ever. What about us? We're done, Wayne replied. There's no way. We've done enough damage. Ursula nodded, but there was something stubborn in her eyes that made Wayne feel uneasy. All right, she said. But what if someone finds out? What if Trudy starts investigating? No one will find out, Wayne said. If we keep quiet, no one will ever know. But even as he said the words, he knew they sounded unconvincing. Secrets have a way of coming out, especially in small towns. When they parted that evening, both felt that their lives had changed dramatically, but neither of them could have imagined how dramatic the consequences of their choice would be. When Wayne got home, he found Trudy in the living room. She was sitting on the sofa with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring out the window. Where were you? She asked without turning around. Out for a walk, he replied. Thinking. About what? About us. About what's going to happen. Trudy turned to him, and he saw something new in her eyes. Not just pain, but suspicion. Wayne, she said slowly, I've been thinking a lot about this diagnosis, and you know what's strange? You weren't surprised at all. When I told you about HIV, you weren't shocked. Why? Wayne felt his heart beating in his throat. Of course I was shocked, he said. I just didn't know what to say. Or did you already know? Trudy asked quietly. How could I have known? I don't know, Wayne. But something's not right here. And I'm going to find out what it is. June in Rifle was hot and muggy. The summer heat turned the usually cool mountain town into a furnace, where even in the evening, the temperature didn't drop below 80 degrees. In weather like this, people became irritable, and long simmering conflicts could erupt without warning. 3 weeks had passed since the day all three of them learned of their diagnosis. 3 weeks of lies, half-truths, and growing tension in the house on Maple Street. Trudy began treatment with antiretroviral drugs. The pills had to be taken strictly according to schedule, and each dose reminded her that her life had changed forever. The side effects were unpleasant: nausea, dizziness, constant fatigue. But the worst part was not knowing where the disease had come from. She asked herself the same question over and over again. How could she have contracted HIV? The options were limited, and each one led to the same conclusion. Wayne was hiding something. I talked to Dr. Martinez, she told her husband over breakfast one hot June day. She said the incubation period for HIV can vary, but symptoms usually appear a few months after infection. Wayne looked up from his coffee. He had lost weight in recent weeks, and deep wrinkles of fatigue had appeared on his face. And that means the infection happened relatively recently. Last year, maybe early this year. Trudy, we've already talked about this. No, his wife interrupted. We haven't. You've been evasive when I've asked you questions. Wayne, if you've been unfaithful to me, I have a right to know. Wayne stood up from the table and walked over to the window. It was already 7 in the morning, and the heat haze rising from the asphalt was visible outside. I haven't cheated on you, he said, but his voice sounded unconvincing. Then explain to me where we got HIV. I don't know, Trudy. Honestly, I don't know. But Trudy no longer believed him. She had seen how nervous he was, how he avoided her gaze, how his behavior had changed over the past few months. Everything pointed to the fact that he was hiding something. On the same day that Trudy left for work, Ursula came to the house. She no longer came every day like she used to. After they found out about the diagnosis, her visits became rare and tense. We need to talk, she said to Wayne. They sat in the living room, avoiding each other's gaze. The closeness that had bound them together during the winter was gone. Now they were united only by guilt and fear. Trudy is starting to suspect, Wayne said. She's asking more and more questions. What do you tell her? That I don't know where it came from. But she doesn't believe me. Ursula was silent, thinking about the situation. Over the past few weeks, she had thought a lot about what had happened between them, about the consequences of their choice. Guilt gnawed at her, but she was even more concerned about what might happen if the truth came out. Maybe we should tell her the truth, she suggested. We've already talked about this, Wayne replied sharply. It would destroy her. She's already destroyed, Ursula objected. Can't you see how she's suffering not knowing the truth? Better she suffers in ignorance than learn that her own mother slept with her husband. The words came out harsher than Wayne intended. Ursula paled, and pain flashed in her eyes. So now it's all my fault? She asked quietly. That's not what I meant. Yes, that's exactly what you meant. I seduced you, you poor innocent man. Ursula, don't. What do you want me to do, Wayne? Just disappear? Cease to exist? Or would you prefer that I leave town? Wayne didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Ursula felt rage boiling up inside her. I see, she said, standing up. So now I'm a problem you have to solve. You know that's not true. Do I know? What do I know, Wayne? All I know is that you're willing to throw me under the bus to save your own skin. She headed for the door, but Wayne caught up with her in the hallway. Ursula, wait. We can work this out calmly. Calmly? She turned to him, her eyes burning with rage. We infected my daughter with a deadly disease, and you want to settle this calmly? It's not a deadly disease if it's treated. Don't lecture me about HIV, Ursula exploded. Do you think it's easy for me to live with this? Do you think it's easy for me to look at Trudy knowing that I'm responsible for her illness? We're both responsible. Yes, we are, but you want me to take all the blame. Ursula ran out of the house, slamming the door behind her. Wayne stood in the hallway, feeling the situation spiraling out of control. The next few days were spent in tense anticipation. Wayne was afraid that Ursula would tell Trudy the truth in a fit of anger. He tried to call her, but she didn't answer. When he drove past her apartment, the lights were out. Trudy noticed his nervousness. You look terrible, she said. What's going on with you? Nothing much. It's just the diagnosis and the treatment are getting to me. It's getting to me too, Trudy replied. But I'm not running away from my problems. What do you mean? I made an appointment to see a psychologist. Dr. Martinez said it would help me cope with the stress. Maybe you should go too. The thought of telling a psychologist about his problems horrified Wayne. "I can handle it myself," he said. "How have you been handling it all these months?" Trudy's voice was bitter. "You're pulling away from me more and more, Wayne. Sometimes I feel like I'm living with a stranger." She was right, and Wayne knew it. He had become a stranger to her, and to himself. The man who had cheated on his wife with her mother, the man who had lied every day, was not the Wayne she knew. On Tuesday, June 20th, Ursula finally showed up. She came in the evening while Trudy was at work. Wayne saw her through the window and felt relieved. At least she hadn't disappeared completely. But when she entered the house, he realized that something had changed. There was a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I've made a decision," she said, without preamble. "What decision?" "I'm going to tell Trudy the truth." Wayne felt the world sway beneath his feet. "Ursula, you can't do that." "I can and I will. She has a right to know where her illness came from." "It will destroy her." "She's already been destroyed by your lies," Ursula shouted. "Can't you see how she's suffering, how she blames herself thinking she caught it somewhere in the hospital? But if you tell her the truth..." "What? What will happen? She'll divorce you? She'll stop talking to me?" "So what? At least she'll know the truth." Wayne tried to find arguments that might change her mind. "Think about your relationship with your daughter," he said. "If you tell her you slept with her husband, she'll never forgive you." "Maybe," Ursula replied, "but I can't live with this lie anymore." "What about me?" Wayne asked. "Is this all about you?" "Me?" Ursula laughed bitterly. "I'm thinking about Trudy, about what you and I have done to her life. We can fix everything without telling her the truth. We can..." "What can we do?" Ursula interrupted him. "Keep lying? Watch her suffer? No, Wayne, enough is enough." She headed for the door, but Wayne blocked her way. "Ursula, please think about it again." "I've already thought it through." "What if I tell everyone in town about your drinking problem?" Ursula stopped. After her divorce from Roland, she had indeed gone through a period when she drank more than she should have. It lasted several months until she got herself under control. "Are you threatening me?" she asked quietly. "I'm just saying that everyone has secrets that are better kept hidden." "So you're blackmailing me?" Wayne realized he had gone too far, but he couldn't stop. "Call it what you want, but think about what will happen if the whole town finds out that Ursula Harris is an alcoholic who sleeps with her brothers-in-law." The blow was unexpected and painful. Ursula felt a wave of rage rising within her. "How dare you!" She swung at his face, but Wayne grabbed her arm. "Let me go!" "Ursula, calm down. Let go!" She tried to break free, but Wayne held her tight. In the struggle, they both lost their balance and fell to the floor of the hallway. Ursula hit her head on the edge of the console table. She lay motionless for a moment, and Wayne thought she was just stunned. But when he called her name, she didn't answer. When he turned her onto her back, he saw blood on the floor. "Ursula!" He shook her by the shoulders, but she didn't respond. Panic gripped him. He checked her pulse. There was none. He tried CPR, chest compressions, everything he knew from first aid classes. Nothing worked. Ursula Harris was dead. Wayne sat on the floor next to his mother-in-law's body, unable to believe what had happened. It had all happened so quickly, so unexpectedly. He hadn't wanted to kill her, hadn't intended to hurt her. It was an accident. But who would believe him? Who would believe that Ursula's death was an accident, especially if it came out that they had been involved? Wayne tried to collect his thoughts. He had to do something, make a decision. He couldn't just call an ambulance and the police. There were too many questions, too many ways for the truth to come out. He got up and started pacing around the house, trying to figure out what to do next. Ursula's car was in the driveway. The neighbors could have seen her arrive, but no one saw her leave. An idea came to him suddenly. He could take the body away, stage an accident somewhere else. A river, a car crash, something that would explain her death without connecting it to him. But first, he had to clean up the house. The blood on the floor, the fingerprints, any evidence that she had been there. Wayne worked quickly and methodically. The mechanical work helped him not to think about what he was doing, not to fully realize the horror of the situation. When the house was cleaned, he wrapped Ursula's body in a blanket and carried it to the garage. Then he got into her car and drove to the river, to the place where the road made a sharp turn over a cliff. The spot was known to locals as dangerous, especially in the dark. He parked the car at the edge of the road, started the engine, and drove it toward the cliff. At the last moment, he jumped out and watched as the car flew down toward the river. He walked home through the woods. It was late, almost midnight. Trudy hadn't come home from work yet. Her shift ended at 1 a.m. When she arrived home, she found her husband in the living room in front of the TV. "Hi," she said wearily. "How was your day?" "Fine," Wayne replied without turning to her. "How was work?" "Tough. Today was a terrible day." She kissed him on the top of his head and went upstairs. Wayne remained sitting in front of the TV, not seeing or hearing anything that was happening on the screen. The next morning, Ursula's car was found by fishermen. The body was in the car, trapped between the seat and the steering wheel. The police immediately assumed it was an accident. The woman was driving in the dark and lost control on a dangerous curve. Detective Michael Reynolds arrived at the scene around 9 in the morning. He was 41 years old and had seen many deaths on the road during his 15 years on the force. This looked like a typical accident, but something bothered him. Ursula Harris had lived in Rifle her whole life and knew this road like the back of her hand. What was she doing here late at night? "Does anyone know where she was going?" he asked one of the police officers. "Not yet, but we've just started the investigation." Reynolds nodded and walked closer to the car. The body had already been taken away, but he could examine the scene of the accident. The skid marks, the position of the car, the damage, everything pointed to her simply veering off the road. But something still seemed wrong. The news of Ursula's death reached Trudy at work. Roland, her father, called. "Trudy, I need to tell you something." His voice trembled. "Your mother was in an accident." "What?" Trudy felt her legs go weak. "She crashed her car. The police say it was an accident." "Is she alive?" The silence on the other end of the line told her everything. Trudy sat down on the hospital floor and cried. Her co-workers gathered around her, trying to comfort her, but she couldn't hear anything. Her mother was dead. The only person who truly cared about her was gone from her life forever. Wayne arrived at the hospital as soon as Trudy called him. He hugged his wife, stroked her hair, and spoke comforting words. All the while, he thought that he was to blame for her tears. "I don't understand," Trudy said through her tears. "What was she doing on that road? Where was she going?" "I don't know, honey," Wayne replied. "Maybe to a friend's house, or just driving around to clear her head. But so late? That's not like her." Wayne didn't know what to say. Each of Trudy's questions was like a knife in his heart, a reminder of what he had done. But the worst part was that part of him felt relieved. Ursula could no longer tell the truth. The secret of their relationship had died with her. Detective Michael Reynolds couldn't let go of the Ursula Harris case. 2 weeks had passed since the accident, but something continued to bother him. He sat in his office, rereading the coroner's report. It looked like a normal accident, but the details wouldn't let him go. Why was Ursula driving on a mountain road late at night? Where was she going? And why didn't any of her relatives know about her plans? The first breakthrough came when Ursula's neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, remembered an important detail. "I saw Ursula leave on Tuesday around 7 in the evening," she told Reynolds. "She looked very upset. I didn't see her come back, even though I don't go to bed before 11. Reynolds checked the footage from the only surveillance camera in the town center. What he saw changed everything. At 7:47 p.m., Ursula's car drove toward Maple Street, where the Stewarts lived. And at 11:23 p.m., it drove back to the scene of the accident. That meant Ursula had been at their house that night, even though they claimed she hadn't. The next day, Reynolds returned to the Stewarts' house. It looked gloomy. The blinds were down, and the roses in the garden were wilted. Wayne opened the door, looking tired and haggard. "I need to clarify something," said the detective in the living room, where Wayne and a pale Trudy were sitting. "Are you sure you didn't see Ursula on Tuesday evening?" "Absolutely," Trudy replied. "I was at work until 1 in the morning." "Mr. Stewart, I have a recording from a surveillance camera," Reynolds said, looking directly at Wayne. "Your mother-in-law's car drove to your house at 7:47 p.m. and back at 11:23 p.m. There was a moment of silence. Trudy looked at her husband in confusion. "Wayne?" Wayne knew he was caught. Cameras don't lie. "Yes," he said quietly. "Ursula came on Tuesday." "Why did you lie?" Reynolds asked. "I didn't want to upset Trudy anymore." "I don't understand," Trudy interjected. "Why would my mother's visit upset me?" Wayne remained silent, backing himself into a corner. "What did you talk about with Ursula?" The detective continued his questioning. "Family matters." "Was she upset?" "A little." "Mr. Stewart, lying to an investigator is a serious crime. What happened between you and Ursula?" Trudy looked at her husband with growing fear. Reynolds realized that the witness was about to break down. "We had an argument," Wayne admitted quietly. "About what?" "About our relationship." "What relationship?" Trudy asked in a trembling voice. Wayne looked at his wife, and she saw the answer in his eyes. "No," she whispered, "not that." "Did you sleep with my mother?" Trudy shouted, jumping up. Wayne's silence spoke louder than any words. "How long?" she continued through her tears. "Several months. It started in the winter." "And HIV?" Trudy suddenly understood everything. "Did you get it from her and pass it on to me?" "We didn't know." "You didn't know?" Trudy was furious. "You had sex and didn't know?" Reynolds watched the family drama unfold in silence, mentally piecing together the puzzle. "What exactly happened on Tuesday?" he asked. Wayne sighed heavily. "Ursula wanted to tell Trudy the truth. She said she couldn't lie anymore. We got into a fight. She tried to leave. I tried to stop her. We struggled. She fell and hit her head on the table." "And she died?" "Yes. It was an accident." "And then you staged an accident?" Wayne nodded. "I didn't want anyone to find out about our relationship. I didn't want to hurt Trudy." "But you've already hurt me," Trudy shouted. "You ruined my life. You infected me, slept with my mother, and then killed her." "I didn't kill her. It was an accident." "Mr. Stewart," Reynolds said in an official tone, "you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Ursula Harris and concealment of evidence." Trudy sat down on the sofa and covered her face with her hands. Her world had finally come crashing down. The trial took place 3 months later. Wayne was found guilty of manslaughter and concealment of evidence. The sentence was 8 years in prison. Trudy filed for divorce before the trial. She sold the house and moved to Denver, where she got a job at a large hospital. She wanted to start a new life, far away from Rifle and her nightmarish memories. Roland stayed in town, continuing to work as a driver, but became even more withdrawn. The death of his ex-wife and the arrest of his son-in-law made him an unwanted local celebrity. Detective Reynolds received praise for solving the case, but he felt no satisfaction. The story was too tragic. In prison, Wayne spent his days thinking about how things could have turned out differently. If only he hadn't given in to temptation. If only he had stopped at the very beginning. If only he had found a way to solve his marital problems without betrayal. But time cannot be turned back. Ursula was dead, Trudy was devastated, and he had lost everything: his family, his freedom, his respect. The price of a moment's desire had proved too high. Rifle returned to his normal life, but the story of the son-in-law who cheated on his mother-in-law and killed her became part of local folklore. People talked about it for a long time, shaking their heads and wondering how family secrets could destroy lives. The story of the family from Rafel was a reminder that some secrets are too dangerous to keep, and some desires are too destructive to fulfill. In a small town where everyone knows everyone, the truth always finds a way to come out, no matter how painful it may be. A year later, Trudy began a new relationship with a fellow doctor in Denver. She would never forget the pain of betrayal, but she learned to move on. Sometimes she thought about her mother, not the woman who had betrayed her, but the woman who had read her fairy tales as a child. Those memories helped her heal. In his prison cell, Wayne realized that he had lost more than his freedom. He had lost himself. The man who started out as a loving husband and successful mechanic had become a murderer because of a series of bad decisions. Every morning, he woke up thinking that one fateful winter night had changed the lives of 3 people forever.